A black, hardworking man faces a tough routine after his car breaks down. Every day, he walks a long distance to work, arriving late and exhausted. His boss, intrigued by the continual lateness, follows him to discover the truth. Marcus Hill, at 36 years old, was a man of few words but with a huge heart. He grew up in Detroit, Michigan, a city marked by economic struggles but also by a strong culture of resilience. He lived in a simple yet cozy house in a suburban neighborhood with his wife Lisa and their two children, Jaden and Amara. Despite the bills piling up and money always seeming tight, Marcus's family lived united and in harmony. The sound of Amara's laughter filled the house at the end of the day, while Jaden, more reserved, spent hours reading his history books. Lisa, with her natural calmness, balanced the daily chaos of the house with love and patience. That morning, Marcus got up before sunrise. The sound of the old alarm clock filled the room, and he stretched with a deep sigh, feeling the weight of the workweek. He looked to the side and saw Lisa still asleep, her face peaceful under the soft morning light starting to peek through the window. In the kitchen, Lisa was already up, making coffee. Her face lit up with a smile when she saw Marcus enter. "You're up early today," she commented, handing him a cup. "Can't sleep with so much on my mind, Lisa," Marcus replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "Bills are coming in, and I need to work extra hours at the factory." Lisa stepped closer and placed her hand over his, her eyes showing the concern she tried to hide. "We'll be okay, Marcus. We always find a way, no matter what." He smiled back, but the weight of his responsibilities as a husband and father never completely left his shoulders. He knew Lisa was trying to reassure him, but both of them felt the financial stress growing each day. "Daddy!" shouted Amara, running into the kitchen and jumping into Marcus's arms. "Are you taking me to school today?" Marcus picked her up and laughed. Amara's energy always making him forget his problems, if only for a moment. "Not today, my princess. I have to leave early for work, but I promise we'll do something special this weekend, okay?" Amara pouted, but quickly brightened up again when Jaden walked into the kitchen. "Dad, can I use the computer after school? I need to work on a history project," Jaden asked. "Sure, Jaden, but don't forget to help your mom with the chores first, okay?" Jaden nodded and sat down at the table to eat his breakfast. The simplicity of the scene, the morning calmness of his family, was what kept Marcus going every day. After a quick kiss to Lisa and a hug to his children, Marcus grabbed the car keys, ready for another day at the factory. He looked back, seeing his family gather to start their day, and felt a mix of pride and anxiety. Life was tough, but there was beauty in the unity they shared. It was this silent strength that kept him steady, even when the world seemed to be falling apart around him. However, he didn't know that in the coming weeks, this strength would be tested in ways he never imagined. Marcus got into the car and started it, but the engine sputtered before finally catching. He ignored the strange noise, used to the quirks of the old sedan he had been driving for years. Work awaited him, and he had a family to support, no matter what obstacles came his way. He just didn't know that soon that car would stop working, and with that, one of the most challenging journeys of his life would begin. Marcus worked at Detroit Motor Parts, a factory that produced automotive parts. Every day he arrived before 7 in the morning, wearing his blue coverall with M. Hill embroidered on the chest, and prepared for a day of hard work. The sound of machines and the smell of metal had been part of his routine for almost 10 years since he started that job to support his family. That afternoon, during the break, Marcus was sitting alone in the break room, distractedly chewing on a sandwich Lisa had made. The fatigue from the previous weeks was starting to accumulate, and he felt the weight of each work hour on his back. His coworker, Ron, approached and sat next to him. "Hey, Marcus, you look exhausted, man. Everything all right?" Ron asked, placing a soda bottle on the table. Marcus slowly shook his head, still chewing, trying not to show how tough things were. "I'm fine. Just the usual routine, you know?" he replied, forcing a smile. Ron didn't seem convinced. "Everyone here is tired, but you seem different. Something going on at home?" Marcus sighed, taking a sip from the water bottle he always carried. "It's nothing serious. Just some money worries, as usual. But who isn't in the same boat, right?" Ron nodded, showing empathy. He knew Marcus was the type of man who didn't like to share his problems, always maintaining a firm and unshakable demeanor, but there was something more in his eyes in recent weeks. "If you need help, you know you can count on me, right?" Marcus thanked him with a nod, but quickly changed the subject, uncomfortable with opening up about his life to others. He hated the feeling of vulnerability. He had been taught from a young age that a man should carry his own burdens without bothering others. Back on the production line, the hard work served as a distraction for Marcus, pushing away thoughts about overdue bills and his family's needs. But that afternoon, his phone vibrated in his pocket, something unusual during his shift. "Marcus?" Lisa's voice on the other end was low and tense. "Lisa, is everything okay?" Marcus asked, worried, as he moved away from the production line, looking for a quieter place to talk. "A new electricity bill just came in. We're behind." "Marcus, I think we're going to have to choose between paying for electricity or water this month." He felt a tightness in his chest. The responsibility seemed to crush him more and more. "I'll see what I can do," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You've been working so hard, Marcus. I hate having to tell you this, but we can't keep going like this." Lisa's voice trembled slightly. He knew how much she also carried the weight of this situation. "I'll figure something out, Lisa. I always do." Marcus forced confidence, but the truth was he was exhausted. The bills, the delays, the pressure at work. Everything seemed to be piling up like a storm ready to break. When he hung up, he stood for a few minutes, staring at the factory's concrete floor. The deafening sound of the machines in the background, which was usually just part of the routine, seemed louder at that moment, more suffocating. On the way home, Marcus's car made a strange noise again. This time, the engine almost died when he stopped at a traffic light. He gripped the steering wheel, feeling the frustration grow inside him. He couldn't handle another problem right now. The car was his only way to get to and from work, and without it, he didn't even want to think about that possibility. When he got home, the usual scene awaited him. Lisa helping Jaden with his homework at the dining table while Amara was drawing on the couch. The sight usually warmed Marcus's heart, but that day, everything felt heavier. "How was work today?" Lisa asked when she saw him come in. "The usual," Marcus replied, letting out a long sigh and sitting on the couch next to Amara. Amara leaned over him, placing a colorful drawing on Marcus's lap. "Look, Daddy, I drew our family," she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. In the drawing, she had drawn Marcus and Lisa holding hands, with Jaden and Amara beside them. The simplicity of the scene almost made him cry. The beauty in Amara's innocence was a constant reminder of what he was fighting to protect. He kissed the top of Amara's head and smiled, even though his heart was heavy. "It's beautiful, my love. You're the best artist in the world." But inside, Marcus wondered how much longer he could keep up the appearance that everything was okay. That morning, the sun had barely risen when Marcus left the house. The sky was still tinged with a bluish gray, and the neighborhood streets remained silent except for the sound of the wind rustling the trees. He took one last look at his house before getting into the car, adjusted the rearview mirror, and turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed and roared irregularly, but as usual, after a few seconds of persistence, the car finally started. Marcus let out a sigh of relief and began his usual commute to work. The old sedan had been showing signs of wear for months, but he hoped it would hold up until he could save enough money for a decent repair. The metallic noise coming from the engine was disturbing, but he had no choice. He needed to get to the factory, no delays. As he drove through the streets of Detroit, his mind wandered to thoughts of how to get out of the tight financial situation. He thought about asking for an extra shift, maybe getting a second job on weekends, but that would mean less time with his family, and that was a choice he didn't want to make. Then the noise from the engine got worse. A loud pop echoed from under the hood, followed by a high-pitched whine. The steering wheel stiffened in his hands, and the car began to lose speed. "No, no, no," Marcus muttered, trying to maintain control as the vehicle slowly coasted to the side of the road. The engine died completely, leaving the car silent except for the occasional sound of passing cars and the wind. He slapped the steering wheel in frustration. "Why now?" he said aloud, knowing there would be no answer. Marcus got out of the car and cautiously opened the hood. Light smoke rose from the engine, and the smell of something burning hung in the air. He sighed, putting his hands on his hips, staring helplessly at the broken-down car. "Great," he muttered. He looked around, trying to figure out what to do next. He was about 3 miles from the factory. Walking was his only option, and even if he ran, he'd still be late. Marcus ran a hand over his face, frustrated, and went back to the car to grab his backpack. He knew he had no choice. He had to walk. As he trudged along the road, the sun began to rise on the horizon, but the tension inside Marcus only grew. He thought about his boss, Mr. Thompson, and the scolding he'd get for being late again. Mr. Thompson was already losing patience with his frequent tardiness, and Marcus didn't know how much longer he could keep his job if things kept going this way. When he finally arrived at the factory, he was already half an hour late. Sweaty and out of breath, he hurried through the entrance gate and ran toward the production line, hoping not to be noticed. But he had no such luck. "Hill." Mr. Thompson's loud, irritated voice echoed over the machines. Marcus stopped in his tracks and slowly turned around, knowing the conversation he was about to have wouldn't be easy. Mr. Thompson, a burly and stern man, approached with heavy steps, his face red with frustration. "You're late again," he said, his eyes fixed on Marcus. "This is the 3rd time this week. What's going on?" Marcus looked away, feeling the weight of shame settle on his shoulders. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. There was a problem with the car," he replied in a low voice. Mr. Thompson shook his head, incredulous. "Car problems? Every day a new excuse, Hill. I'm starting to lose my patience. If you can't get here on time, maybe you need to rethink if this is the right place for you." Marcus swallowed hard. He knew Mr. Thompson wasn't a cruel man, but he also wasn't someone with much patience for personal problems. What Mr. Thompson didn't know was the truth, that the car was broken and that Marcus, too embarrassed to admit he couldn't afford the repairs, had been walking miles every day, trying to hide his situation. "I'll fix it, Mr. Thompson. I promise it won't happen again," Marcus said, trying to stay calm, even though his stomach churned. His boss stared at him for a long moment before sighing and shaking his head. "All right, Hill, but this is your last chance. Don't be late again. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Marcus nodded quickly, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. As Mr. Thompson walked away, Marcus let out a long sigh and returned to his position on the production line. As the noise of the machines filled the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that his situation was becoming unsustainable. The car, the bills, the shame of telling the truth. Everything seemed to be piling up like a mountain ready to collapse. Back at work, Marcus tried to focus, but his mind kept wandering. He needed to fix the car, but he didn't have the money. And more than that, he needed to do it without worrying Lisa, without letting his family see how much he was struggling. As the day dragged on, Marcus felt the weight of the constant struggle growing heavier. The days had turned into an endless cycle of exhaustion and frustration for Marcus. Every morning, he left the house before dawn, the cold Detroit air biting his face as he walked toward the factory. With the car still out of commission, each day was a 5-mile marathon on foot, both to and from work. In the first week, he thought he could manage. "Maybe tomorrow I'll get the car fixed," he repeated to himself. But the days went by, and the money never materialized. Marcus kept everything quiet, not telling Lisa or his coworkers. Pride and shame kept him silent. One night, when Marcus arrived home exhausted and late, Lisa was waiting for him in the living room. She looked at the clock and then at Marcus's tired face. "Working late again?" she asked, frowning as she got up from the couch. Marcus dropped his backpack on the floor and gave her a quick kiss on the forehead. "Something like that," he muttered, walking to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Lisa followed him, clearly worried. "Marcus, you've been coming home later and later. What's going on?" she insisted, crossing her arms. "And you look exhausted." He avoided her gaze, drinking the water slowly to buy some time. "I'm just doing what needs to be done, Lisa. The factory is busy, and I need these extra hours," he said, trying to sound casual, but the weariness in his voice betrayed him. Lisa wasn't convinced. She knew Marcus too well not to notice something was wrong. "And the car? It's been sitting on the street for days. You said you were going to fix it, but so far..." He cut her off before she could finish. "I'll take care of it, Lisa. Just give me some time, okay?" he said, perhaps a bit more brusquely than he intended. Lisa blinked, surprised by his response. She knew Marcus was under a lot of pressure, but this wasn't like him. "Marcus, we're in this together. If you're having a hard time, if something's going on, you can tell me. You don't have to carry it all by yourself." Her voice softened, full of concern. He looked down, feeling a pang of guilt. Lisa was right. She had always been there for him, always supportive, but Marcus's pride got in the way. Admitting he couldn't handle the situation felt like a personal failure. He already felt ashamed enough at work. Being seen as weak at home was something he couldn't bear. "Everything's under control, Lisa. Just trust me, okay?" he replied, forcing a smile. She sighed, realizing there was no point in pushing. Still, the worry didn't leave her eyes. "I trust you. I just don't want you to hurt yourself trying to handle everything alone," she said softly, before turning to go back to the living room. Marcus watched her leave and felt the weight of emotional exhaustion on him. All he wanted was to tell the truth, to share the burden with her. But how could he admit that he walked miles to work every day, that he couldn't afford to fix the car, and that his dignity was being crushed by something so simple? The next morning, the routine started again. He left the house before dawn, his shoes already worn from the daily trek. What had initially seemed like a minor inconvenience was now a silent torture. The biting cold of the early morning pierced through his thin coat, and the weight of his backpack seemed to double with each mile. Marcus was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. As he walked through the still deserted streets, the only sound was his footsteps echoing on the pavement. He looked toward the horizon, where the factory lights glowed in the distance, and felt a mix of determination and despair. He had to keep going. He had to support his family. He couldn't fail. When he finally reached the factory, almost always a few minutes late, he did his best to avoid Mr. Thompson. The boss eyed him with suspicion, clearly annoyed by the constant tardiness. But Marcus always came up with a quick excuse, a problem with traffic, something at home. He knew he couldn't keep up these excuses for much longer, but his pride kept him silent. That night, as Marcus walked home, the wind was especially cold. He pulled his coat tighter around himself, his eyes burning with fatigue. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, and he could hardly believe there was another day ahead, another walk. All he wanted was to sleep, but he knew the alarm would ring again, early as always. When he got home, Jaden was awake, waiting in the living room. "Dad, are you okay?" the boy asked, his voice full of curiosity and concern. Marcus forced a smile, trying to seem untroubled. "I'm fine, son. Just tired from work." Jaden nodded, but his look showed he knew something wasn't right. Marcus walked over and ruffled his son's hair. "Go to bed. You have school tomorrow." "Okay, Dad. Good night." Jaden got up and headed to his room. Marcus was left alone in the living room, feeling the weight of his situation growing by the day. He knew he couldn't keep going like this much longer, but he still had no idea how to escape this spiral of exhaustion and shame. And deep down, he wondered how much longer he could keep walking in the dark, alone. The days became increasingly difficult for Marcus. His legs ached constantly from the long walk, and the exhaustion was visible on his face. He had lost weight, and his dark circles had deepened. At the factory, he tried to stay productive, but the fatigue was starting to affect his performance. The lateness continued, and the pressure of keeping everything a secret was mounting. Mr. Thompson, who was already impatient, began to watch him closely. He noticed the change in Marcus's behavior, how he arrived late every day, always a bit more tired, but never asking for help or talking about what was going on. Thompson was a practical and stern man, but he also knew when something was wrong. One afternoon, while Marcus was taking a break, Thompson approached him, crossing his arms. "Hill, can I talk to you for a minute?" His voice was serious but not aggressive. Marcus, who was sitting alone in the cafeteria, looked up and nodded, knowing he couldn't avoid this conversation. Thompson sat down across from him, his eyes fixed on Marcus's face. "You know I've been trying to be patient with your lateness, right?" Thompson began, getting straight to the point. Marcus nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He didn't know what to say. I understand that everyone has problems and that life isn't always easy, but this has gone on long enough. 3 weeks of almost daily lateness, Hill. 3 weeks. Thompson shook his head, clearly frustrated. And I still don't understand what's going on. Marcus looked away, struggling with the urge to tell the truth. He knew Thompson was waiting for an explanation, but his pride and shame still kept him from speaking. Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry. It's just that things at home are complicated. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I'm trying to sort it out. Thompson frowned, realizing that Marcus was being evasive. He was a businessman, used to reading people. Something wasn't right. Trying to sort it out won't keep this job, Hill. I need clarity. I need to know what's really going on, because if this continues, we'll have to take other measures, he said, his voice firm but with a hint of concealed concern. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He knew his boss was right. He couldn't keep hiding behind vague excuses. But still, the words wouldn't come. The fear of seeming weak, of exposing his vulnerability, held him back. I promise I'll fix this, Mr. Thompson. He stopped, not knowing how to continue. Thompson watched him for a moment, noticing Marcus's hesitation. The silence that followed was heavy, almost palpable. After a few seconds, the boss sighed, as if making an internal decision. All right, Hill. I won't press you any further today, but know that this is your last chance. If things don't improve soon, I'll have to take action. Thompson stood up, his face still stern. I expect to see some changes, and quickly. Before leaving, Thompson paused for a second, turning to Marcus. And Hill, if you need help, any kind of help, you know you can ask, right? Marcus looked at his boss, surprised. He hadn't expected to hear those words. Yes, sir, he replied, not very convincingly. Thompson nodded and left, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He felt even more trapped. He knew that time was running out, that soon there would be no more excuses, and that he continued to disappoint those around him. The question was, how could he ask for help when his biggest battle was internal, against his own pride? At the end of that day, Marcus began another long walk home. The sun was already setting, and he barely had the energy to keep going. His feet hurt with every step, and his thoughts went in circles. He thought of Lisa, the kids, and the conversation with Thompson. Everything was weighing on him at once. As he walked through the increasingly dark streets, an idea started to form in his mind. Maybe it was time to stop fighting alone. Maybe it was time to accept that he didn't have to carry all the weight by himself. Shame and fear had isolated him, but he couldn't continue like this. Not for much longer. When he got home, Marcus was more tired than ever, but this time, with a different resolve in his heart. He knew he needed a plan, but above all, he knew the time was coming to stop hiding the truth. Inside the house, Lisa was waiting for him with a worried look. Marcus, are you okay? She asked, noticing her husband's extreme exhaustion. He took a deep breath, looking at her with a sincerity he hadn't shown in a long time. Lisa, we need to talk. I can't hide what's going on anymore. She stepped closer, feeling the gravity of his words. What's happening, Marcus? She asked, gently touching his arm. He looked at her, his eyes tired but this time not avoiding the truth. The car. It broke down weeks ago, and I've been walking to work every day since. I don't have the money to fix it, and I'm ashamed to ask for help. I feel like a failure. Lisa looked at him, surprised and worried. She moved closer, holding his hand. Marcus, you're not a failure. We're in this together, remember? If you're going through this, we're going through this. You don't have to carry it alone. We'll figure it out together. Marcus felt a wave of relief hearing those words. For the first time in weeks, he stopped feeling like he was fighting alone. He hugged her, feeling the tension in his body finally start to ease. He knew the challenges were still there, but now there was a light, a hope that, with his family's help and maybe even Thompson's, he could weather this storm. The next morning began like all the previous ones. Marcus got up before dawn, trying to move quietly so as not to wake Lisa. Despite the relief of the previous night's conversation, he still felt pressured to find a quick solution. The car repair was too expensive, and though Lisa was willing to help, Marcus still didn't know how to solve everything without depending on others. He left the house, the cold wind hitting his face as he walked through the deserted streets of Detroit. The factory seemed a world away, but as always, he started his long journey on foot, his mind full of worries. Arriving at work, Marcus barely noticed Mr. Thompson's watchful eye. The boss, already suspicious for some time, wasn't convinced by Marcus's vague answers. That day, Thompson decided it was time to find out the truth for himself. While Marcus worked at his station, focused on the machines and trying to hide his exhaustion, Thompson called his assistant, Carl. "Carl, I want you to go to the street where Marcus usually comes from," Thompson said, in a serious tone. "See if there's anything wrong there. I'm not satisfied with the answers he's been giving. I want to understand what's happening." Carl, always a discreet assistant, nodded and left without question. Thompson didn't like meddling in his employees' personal lives, but in Marcus's case, something was deeply bothering him. There was a constant tension in the air whenever he looked at that man working so diligently, but always exhausted and late. If something was wrong, he needed to know. Meanwhile, Marcus continued working, barely suspecting his secrets were about to be revealed. He knew Thompson was losing patience, but he still didn't know how to tell the whole truth. Just one more day, he thought. I'll fix it tomorrow. At the end of the shift, Carl returned with the information Thompson had requested. "I found his car, sir," Carl said, with a serious expression. "It's parked on a side street, about 2 miles from here. It looks like it hasn't been moved in weeks." Thompson frowned, sensing there was something deeper at play. "Parked, you say?" he asked, trying to piece the puzzle together. "Yes, sir. Covered in dust and with visibly worn-out tires. Looks like it's been broken down for a while," Carl replied. Thompson was silent for a few moments, processing the information. Suddenly, everything made sense. The constant lateness, the visible exhaustion on Marcus's face, the evasive excuses. "So that's it," Thompson murmured, more to himself than to Carl. He looked out his office window, watching the workers leave at the end of the shift. Among them, Marcus, walking slowly out of the factory, clearly tired. Thompson stood up, grabbed his coat, and left his office. Without Marcus noticing, he began to follow him at a safe distance. Thompson walked through the dark streets, observing his employee walk with heavy, slow steps. With every block he passed, the boss became more certain that Marcus was hiding the truth. But now he understood the reason: pride. After almost an hour of walking, Marcus finally reached the street where his car was parked, covered in dust and dry leaves. Thompson watched from a distance as Marcus looked at the vehicle with an expression of frustration and resignation. He didn't get into the car. He just walked past it, continuing his journey home. Thompson sighed, his heart, hardened by years of being in charge, softening a bit at the situation he had just witnessed. He understood, in a way he hadn't expected, what Marcus was going through. That silent struggle, the shame of admitting he needed help, was something he himself might have felt in the past. The next morning, Thompson decided to act. He gathered some of the workers closest to Marcus, men who always showed him respect. "Guys, I need your help," Thompson said, looking at the curious faces of his subordinates. "Hill has been going through a tough time and hasn't said anything. His car is broken down, and he's been walking miles every day to get to work without asking for help from anyone." The men looked at each other, surprised. Marcus had always been a reserved but dedicated guy. None of them imagined he was facing such a significant hardship. "So, what can we do?" Carl asked, showing concern. Thompson gave a small smile. "We're going to help, as a team. We're going to fix his car. I'll arrange for a mechanic to do that, but we also need to help him with whatever else he might need. Does anyone know how things are at home for him?" "I heard things aren't easy for his family," one of the workers responded. "Maybe we can organize something to send food, or see if they need anything." Thompson nodded. "Exactly. Let's show Marcus he's not alone. And please, don't mention anything until the surprise is ready." The men agreed, and together they began planning how they would help Marcus and his family. That evening, Marcus made his long walk home, unaware that a support network was forming in his favor. The wheels were set in motion, and soon he would discover that even in the toughest situations, There is always room for kindness and empathy. When he got home, Lisa greeted him with a tired but loving smile. "How was your day today?" she asked, hugging him. "As tiring as always, but a bit better," he said, trying to stay optimistic. Although he still didn't know what the future held, something inside Marcus was starting to change. Maybe, finally, he was ready to accept the help he desperately needed. What he didn't know was that this help was already on its way, in a way he could never have imagined. The next morning, Marcus followed his usual routine, waking up early and getting ready for another long walk to the factory. But when he opened the front door, something was different. Right in front of his house, where his broken-down car was parked, he saw a black van. A man in uniform, wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit, was inspecting the vehicle. Marcus frowned, confused, and took a few steps towards him. "Excuse me?" Marcus called out, still unsure of what was happening. "What are you doing with my car?" The mechanic turned around, wiping his greasy hands on a cloth. "Hill, right? Marcus Hill?" he asked, confirming the name with a slight smile. "Yes, that's me. But what's going on here?" Marcus was visibly intrigued. His car had been sitting there for weeks, and he hadn't hired any service. "I'm Jim, from Thompson's Motors. Your boss, Mr. Thompson, sent us to fix your car. He asked us to take a look and get it running like new," the mechanic explained, continuing to inspect the engine. Marcus stood still for a few seconds, processing what he had just heard. "Thompson sent to fix my car," he repeated slowly, almost in disbelief. "But how did he know?" Jim shrugged, as he placed the tools in a box next to the car. "I don't know the details. I just know he seemed very determined to help you. And it looks like your car only needs a few new parts. We'll get it sorted out today. By the end of the day, it'll be running again." Marcus was silent, surprise etched on his face. The generosity of Thompson and the team caught him off guard. He knew he was in a tough spot, but never imagined his boss would take the initiative to help him like this. For a moment, he felt torn between gratitude and shame. I don't know what to say," Marcus murmured, scratching the back of his neck as he looked at the car and the mechanic working. Jim smiled understandingly. "You don't need to say anything. That's what we're here for. You seem like a hard worker. I think everyone needs a hand now and then." Marcus nodded in thanks, still processing everything, and decided to walk to work while the car was being fixed. When he arrived at the factory, he already felt different. He knew that, somehow, things were starting to change for the better. As soon as he stepped onto the factory floor, Thompson was waiting for him in the office. "Hill, can I talk to you for a moment?" his boss called, with a friendlier tone than usual. Marcus nodded, walking toward the office, still feeling a mix of emotions. Once inside, Thompson invited him to sit down. The office had a view of the factory floor, and Marcus watched the workers at their stations, trying to organize his thoughts. "Mr. Thompson, I don't even know how to begin to thank you," Marcus started, clearly uncomfortable. "I didn't expect this. I really didn't know what to do about the car." Thompson smiled slightly, but his expression was serious. "Hill, I know you've been going through some tough times. When I found out about the car, everything made sense. You've been walking miles to get to work every day and never said a word," Thompson said, crossing his arms. "But tell me, why didn't you ask for help? I would have understood." Marcus lowered his eyes, struggling against the pride that had kept him silent for so long. I didn't want to seem weak. I didn't want people to think I couldn't handle my problems. I have a family to support, and I felt ashamed that I couldn't solve something as simple as a broken-down car," Marcus explained in a low voice. Thompson nodded, understanding. He was a proud man himself and knew how hard it was to accept help. "Marcus, I know asking for help can be hard, but that doesn't mean you're weak. We all go through times when we need support, and you've been one of the most dedicated workers here. It's not fair for you to go through all this alone," Thompson said, his voice firm but kind. Marcus looked at his boss, still surprised by the empathy he was showing. I really didn't expect this. I thought you were just mad about the delays," Marcus said, trying to understand the change in attitude. Thompson chuckled softly. "I was mad, yes," he admitted, "but I knew there was something more. No one is late like that without a reason. And when I saw you struggling so much not to ask for help, I knew I had to step in. Marcus was silent for a moment, absorbing everything that had happened. He finally understood that he wasn't alone in that. Despite his pride, there were people around him willing to lend a hand. I really appreciate it, Mr. Thompson. I don't know how I can repay you, Marcus said, feeling the weight of weeks of hardship starting to lift. Thompson shook his head. You don't need to thank me, Marcus. The whole team wanted to help. You're part of this team, and when one of us has a problem, we all do. That's how a real team works. At that moment, Marcus realized he wasn't just a solitary worker but part of something bigger. The factory wasn't just a place to work. It was a community that, in the toughest times, came together to support those in need. Thompson stood up, ending the conversation with a friendly nod. Your car will be ready by the end of the day, and if you need anything else, anything at all, come to me. We'll figure it out. Understood? Marcus stood up as well, shaking Thompson's hand gratefully. Understood, sir. Thank you so much. As Marcus returned to the factory floor, he felt a new lightness. That night's walk home would be his last. He had been surprised by unexpected generosity and, for the first time in a long time, allowed himself to believe that better days were ahead. That afternoon, Marcus felt a mix of anxiety and relief knowing his car would be fixed by the end of the day. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling after weeks of long walks and fighting fatigue. As he worked, he thought about how things would change from now on, and he felt a glimmer of hope. At the end of the day, Thompson called him into his office once more. Hill, come with me, his boss said, grabbing his coat. Marcus followed, still a bit bewildered by all the kindness he had received. They left the factory together and walked to the parking lot, where Marcus saw his car parked, clean, and looking much better than before. The engine was running, and it sounded smooth, as if the car had just come out of the shop the day it was bought. There it is, Thompson said with a slight smile. The mechanic said it's in perfect condition now. You can drive it home. Marcus stared at the car for a few seconds, almost in disbelief. He felt his eyes well up, but he fought to keep his composure. He approached, running his hand over the hood as if reuniting with an old friend. I don't know how to thank you, Marcus said, his voice choked with emotion. Thompson gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. No need to thank me. Just keep doing what you've always done. Keep being the hardworking man you are. This, he pointed to the car, was our way of recognizing all your effort, even when things were tough. Marcus nodded, at a loss for words to express his gratitude. It was much more than just a fixed car. It was an act of compassion and understanding that he never imagined receiving. I'll keep doing my best, Mr. Thompson, Marcus said, his determination renewed. I promise I won't let you or the team down. Thompson smiled, satisfied with the response. I know you won't, Hill. I know you won't. Now, go home. You deserve some rest. With that, he walked away, waving lightly as he headed back to the factory building. Marcus got into the car, and as he started the engine, he felt immediate relief. There was no longer the sound of broken parts or the struggle to get it running. He drove slowly through the streets of Detroit with a newfound sense of freedom. The simple act of being able to drive home, instead of walking, felt like a luxury he would never take for granted again. When he reached his street, he saw Lisa on the porch, waiting for him. As she saw the car approaching, her eyebrows raised in surprise. Marcus, is that your car? She asked, quickly descending the steps as he parked in the driveway. He got out of the car with a smile on his face. It sure is. Mr. Thompson had everything fixed. It feels like new. Marcus couldn't contain the joy in his voice. Lisa hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of weeks of hardship finally dissolve. Oh my God, Marcus, this is amazing. I can't believe you got it all sorted out, she exclaimed, emotional. Neither can I, Lisa. Neither can I, Marcus replied, holding her by the waist. I spent so much time trying to carry this burden alone. But now that everything's getting back to normal, I realize I should have asked for help sooner. Lisa smiled at him, still holding his hands. The important thing is you did it, Marcus. You didn't give up, even when things were tough. And now we can move forward together. Marcus nodded, feeling grateful to have someone like Lisa by his side, who always believed in him, even when he doubted himself. The kids, who were playing in the yard, ran over when they saw the car. "Daddy, the car's working again," they shouted, excited. Marcus knelt down to hug them, laughing. For the first time in weeks, he felt light. The sense of failure and shame that had accompanied him recently began to dissipate, replaced by a new perspective. Accepting help didn't make him weak. In fact, this experience made him realize the strength in his community and those around him. Later that night, during dinner, Marcus shared with Lisa and the kids how Thompson and the team had come together to help him. The table was more cheerful than it had been in a long time, and the meal tasted different, more special. Lisa served a dessert she had prepared with a smile on her face, feeling that the tide was finally turning for their family. "They really did this for you?" Lisa asked, still impressed by Thompson's gesture. "Yes. I can hardly believe it myself, but yes. And it wasn't just the car. They also organized to help with other things if we need it," Marcus said, still surprised but deeply touched. Lisa shook her head, emotional. "That's really incredible, Marcus. You've always been a man of principles, and now you see people recognize that." He smiled, reflecting on her words. He had never seen himself as someone worthy of such recognition, but now he understood that his dedication, his silent effort, hadn't gone unnoticed. "I just want to make sure we never go through this again," Marcus said thoughtfully. "I'm going to keep fighting for us, Lisa. We're going to come out of this stronger." She held his hand, her gaze firm and loving. "We're in this together, Marcus. We always have been." Marcus knew the challenges weren't over. There were still bills to pay, problems to face, but that night, he felt he had regained something far more valuable than a fixed car. He had regained his faith in human kindness and, more importantly, in himself. That night, as they prepared for bed, Marcus looked out the bedroom window, watching the city lights in the distance. He took a deep breath, feeling grateful for his family, for his boss and colleagues, and for finally accepting that he didn't have to face everything alone. Now, he was certain that with the right people by his side, he could overcome any difficulty. And as Lisa turned off the lights and lay down beside him, Marcus fell asleep with a peaceful smile on his face, knowing he was finally on the right path to recovery. In the days following the repair of Marcus's car, life seemed to have finally found a more stable rhythm. Marcus no longer had to walk miles to work, and the evenings at home with Lisa and the kids were less tense. However, he still felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Thompson and the factory team. He wanted to find a way to repay them but didn't know how. One day, at the end of another workday, Thompson called Marcus into his office with a light smile on his face. "Hill, I wanted to tell you that we're not done helping," Thompson said, pulling out a chair for Marcus to sit. Marcus frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean, Mr. Thompson? You've already done more than I could ever ask for or imagine. You fixed my car and even offered help with other things. I don't know how to repay you." Thompson crossed his arms and looked out the window, thinking before he spoke. "You're a proud man, Hill. I get that. And what we did wasn't expecting anything in return. But know that you're not alone in this journey. The factory team wants to keep supporting you. You know, we all go through tough times, and sometimes all we need is a little help to get back on track." Marcus scratched the back of his neck, still feeling uncomfortable with the idea of receiving more assistance. "I really appreciate it, Mr. Thompson, but my family is managing better now. I don't want to rely on others." Before Marcus could continue, Thompson interrupted him. "Hill, listen. It's not about dependence. It's about community, about solidarity. I talked to the guys, and they decided to pitch in to help with some other things. The factory team took up a collection to buy some groceries for your family and help with other expenses. We want to ease some more of the pressure." Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. He didn't know what to say. It wasn't just Thompson. His colleagues, the people he worked with every day, were also willing to help him. I can't accept this," Marcus said, shaking his head, still trying to process the gesture. "You've already done so much for me. It's not fair for me to take more." Thompson chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Believe me, Hill, everyone wants this, and no one is expecting anything back. It's just an act of kindness from people who care. You're part of this team, part of this community, and when one of us needs help, we come together to make sure no one gets left behind." Marcus remained silent for a few moments, processing what Thompson had just said. He had always worked hard not to be a burden to anyone, to ensure his family was provided for with dignity, but for the first time, he saw the value in accepting the help of the community around him. "I don't know what to say," Marcus murmured, his voice choked with emotion. Thompson smiled and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You don't need to say anything, Hill. Just keep being you. Keep working hard. We'll take care of the rest." As he left the office, Marcus felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, the gratitude for the unwavering support of his colleagues was immense, but on the other, he still struggled with the discomfort of accepting more help. When he got home that night, he found Lisa in the kitchen, preparing dinner while the kids did their homework at the table. "How was work today?" she asked, a loving smile on her face as Marcus walked in. He walked up to her and hugged her from behind, kissing her neck. "The factory folks pitched in and took up a collection to help us with expenses. They bought groceries and still want to help more," he said, straightforwardly. Lisa stopped stirring the pot for a moment, surprised, and turned to face him. "Really?" she asked, with a mix of surprise and relief. "That's amazing, Marcus. They really care about you. About us." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know, but I still feel weird accepting so much help. I don't want them to think I'm taking advantage." Lisa gently cupped Marcus's face, looking directly into his eyes. "They know you'd never take advantage of anyone. You've always been honest and hardworking, and they see that. This help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're respected, that people believe in you." She smiled, encouraging him. "And we need this now. We need this community." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his worries lifted by Lisa's words. She was right. It was hard to admit that he needed help, but he also knew that this support network was a reflection of the respect he had earned through his dedication. "You're right, Lisa. We have to accept this with an open heart," Marcus said, finally allowing himself to accept the kindness of his team. The next morning, when Marcus arrived at the factory, he found a group of colleagues waiting for him in the parking lot. They had bags full of groceries, clothes for the kids, and even some hygiene products. The smiles on their faces showed how happy they were to help. "Hey, Marcus," shouted Paul, one of his closest co-workers. "We've put together these things for you and your family. We know things have been tough, but we're all here for you, man." Marcus felt a lump in his throat at the gesture of generosity. He took a deep breath and walked over to them, shaking Paul's hand. "You have no idea how much this means to me and my family." "I'm truly grateful," Marcus said, his voice sincere and emotional. "No need to thank us, Marcus. We're like a family here, and that's how it should be," Paul replied, giving Marcus a light pat on the shoulder. As they loaded the bags into Marcus's car, he felt, for the first time in a long time, that he was truly supported. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he also knew he wasn't alone anymore. He had his family, his community, and together, they could face any obstacle that came their way. With the support of the factory team, Marcus and his family's situation was starting to improve significantly. The days of long walks were behind them, and the tension that had once hung over them began to lift. The help they received wasn't just a solution to immediate problems, but also a powerful demonstration of support and solidarity. One morning, after a particularly productive day at work, Marcus decided to do something special to express his gratitude. With Lisa's help, he prepared a lunch to share with his co-workers and thank them for their support. They decided it would be a great opportunity to show everyone how much they appreciated the help. As they prepared the food, Lisa remarked with a smile, "I'm really excited for the lunch today. I think everyone will feel appreciated knowing you're making an effort to give back a little of what they've done for us." Marcus was focused on chopping vegetables and turned to her. "I just hope they know how much this meant to me and our family. I never imagined we'd receive so much help, and I really want them to know it wasn't in vain." Lisa smiled, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "They already know, Marcus. Just the fact that you're doing something to show your gratitude is already very meaningful. Let's make this lunch a special moment for everyone." Later, at lunchtime, Marcus and Lisa arrived at the factory carrying boxes of food and desserts. The place was lively, and the co-workers were eager to see what they had prepared. Marcus set up a small table with the dishes while the colleagues began to gather. Paul was one of the first to approach, carrying a plate of desserts. "Hi, Marcus. What do we have here?" Paul asked with a smile. Homemade lunch, just to thank everyone for the support they've given us. Lisa and I wanted to do something special to show our appreciation, Marcus explained, trying not to seem nervous. The group started to serve themselves and chat, and soon the break room was filled with laughter and lively conversations. Marcus took the opportunity to make an informal speech. I just wanted to take this moment to thank all of you, from the bottom of my heart. The help we received was much more than a simple gesture. It was a sign that we have a community that truly cares, Marcus said sincerely. Each of you made a real difference in our lives. His co-workers listened attentively, some with emotional expressions. Thompson, who was in the middle of the group, raised his glass. Marcus, there's no need to thank us. We're all part of this team, and when one of us needs help, we all feel the need to pitch in. We're happy to be able to do this for you and your family, Thompson said, making a toast. With applause, the colleagues raised their glasses in a collective toast. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of unity and camaraderie. You don't know how much this means to us, Lisa said, with an emotional look. We were going through a really tough time, and your help was a true blessing. The lunch continued with lively conversation and smiles. Marcus felt relieved and happy, seeing that the positive atmosphere and sense of community he found at work were reflected in everyone's interactions. After the lunch, Paul approached Marcus, who was helping with the cleanup. Hey, Marcus, I wanted to tell you something. After talking with everyone, we realized you might need a bit more help. We're thinking of organizing a small event, like a fundraiser, to give you an extra boost, Paul said with a hopeful expression. Marcus was surprised and a bit emotional at the idea. I don't know what to say. You've already done so much for us, Marcus started, but Paul interrupted him. Don't worry about it. We want to do this because we believe in you and want to help. The community is here to support you, and this event could be a great way to bring people together and show that we're all in this together. Marcus looked around, seeing the enthusiasm and genuine support from his coworkers. He finally understood that the help he received wasn't just a temporary relief, but a sign that he was an important part of something bigger. If you really want to do this, I accept with gratitude, Marcus said with a sincere smile. And please, let me help in any way I can to make the event a success. Paul smiled back, pleased with the response. Great. Let's start planning. It's going to be an amazing event, and it will definitely make a big difference. As the afternoon wore on and colleagues began to disperse, Marcus and Lisa felt more hopeful than ever. The generosity and support they had received were turning into a network of solidarity that not only addressed immediate needs, but also fostered a sense of community and belonging. Life was finally starting to return to normal, and Marcus knew that, despite the challenges that might still come, he had a team and a community by his side. With that support, he felt ready to face any obstacle that lay ahead. The event that Paul and the co-workers organized for Marcus and his family was a great success. With everyone's help, they managed to plan a community gathering that not only raised funds but also brought everyone even closer together. The community hall was decorated with balloons and banners, and a table full of homemade food, prepared by community volunteers, was ready to welcome the guests. On the morning of the event, Marcus and Lisa were excited but also a bit nervous. They wanted to ensure everything was perfect and that everyone felt welcome. Lisa was in the kitchen, helping with the final touches, while Marcus was in the hall, arranging tables and chairs. Everything looks great, Lisa, Marcus said, looking around the hall with a proud expression. I can't believe how many people came together for this. Lisa smiled, adjusting a tablecloth. I'm impressed too. The community really pulled together to make this happen. And you deserve all of this, Marcus. She paused and hugged him, her eyes shining with pride. It wouldn't have been possible without everyone's support. I just hope the event helps ease some of the burdens we've had lately. As the afternoon began, people started arriving. The hall filled with the buzz of conversation and the cheerful sounds of background music. Marcus and Lisa greeted the guests with warm smiles, thanking everyone for coming. Thompson and Paul were among the first to arrive, and quickly started helping with the reception. Marcus, this event is fantastic, Thompson said, giving a firm handshake. The community really outdid themselves. It's true, Mr. Thompson. I'm still at a loss for words, Marcus replied with a grateful smile. Paul approached with a broad grin. "Hey, Marcus, a few of us put together a little surprise for you. We hope you like it." Paul winked at Marcus and then pointed to a table in the corner of the hall covered with a large box. Intrigued, Marcus walked over to the table with Lisa by his side. When Paul lifted the lid of the box, Marcus was surprised to see a collection of thank you cards written by various coworkers and community members. Each card contained a personal message of support and well wishes. "Look at this, Lisa," Marcus said, trying to hold back his emotion. "These are all thank you cards." Lisa read one of the cards and smiled, clearly moved. "This is wonderful, Marcus. Look at how much they care about you," she said. Thompson approached and placed a friendly hand on Marcus's shoulder. "We also have something else for you," Thompson said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "This is a gift from the team to help with anything you might need." Marcus opened the envelope and found a generous check, more than enough to help cover outstanding expenses and provide some extra relief. I don't know what to say. This is more than I could have imagined," Marcus said, looking at Thompson with teary eyes. "I can't believe how generous you've all been." Thompson smiled and gave Marcus a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Don't worry about it, Hill. We just want to see you and your family happy and secure. It's the least we can do for someone who's given so much to all of us." The event continued with lively music, delicious food, and animated conversation. The kids played in one corner of the hall, and the atmosphere was filled with celebration and camaraderie. Marcus and Lisa took the time to chat with guests, thanking everyone personally. As the evening approached, Paul came over to Marcus and Lisa, looking a bit tired but visibly pleased with the event's success. "I think we can call this a huge success, don't you?" Paul said with a tired but happy smile. "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "I don't have enough words to express how grateful I am to all of you. This event not only helped our family, but also made me feel like I'm part of something bigger." Lisa joined the conversation with a smile on her face. "We're so thankful to everyone for being here and for all the support. You've made a huge difference in our lives." As the lights started to dim and guests began to say their goodbyes, Marcus and Lisa sat together, looking at the now empty hall. The event had been an emotional and transformative experience for them, showcasing the true strength of community and the importance of being surrounded by caring people. "It was an amazing night, wasn't it?" Lisa said, resting her head on Marcus's shoulder. "It was. And I think that, despite the challenges we might still face, we know we're not alone," Marcus said, smiling as he held Lisa's hand. "We'll face the future with hope and determination, knowing we have an entire community by our side." They stood up and began cleaning up while discussing the next steps. Although they knew there was still much to be done, they were ready to tackle any challenge with the support they had received. The night had been a powerful reminder that when a community comes together, it can transform lives and create meaningful change. As they left the hall and headed home, Marcus and Lisa were confident that the future looked promising. With the strength of the community behind them, they felt they could overcome any obstacle that came their way. With the event's success, Marcus and Lisa felt a genuine sense of relief and renewed hope. Life began to settle into a more peaceful and positive rhythm, with Marcus's family adjusting to the support they had received and looking forward to the future with fresh eyes. A month later, the weather was a bit milder, and Marcus was driving his brand new car, a gift from the factory team. The car was a collective donation from all his coworkers, who knew how much it meant to Marcus and his family. Lisa, in turn, was involved in a new community project that had become a hobby, helping to organize events and fundraisers for various local causes. On a Saturday afternoon, Marcus and Lisa were sitting on their front porch, relaxing after a busy morning. The sun was shining, and the kids were playing in the garden. The feeling of normalcy and tranquility was a rare pleasure after the months of hardship. "Marcus, I was thinking," Lisa began, looking thoughtful. "We've received so much help and support over these months. I want to find a way to give back to the community." Marcus smiled, watching the kids play with their new toys. "I was thinking the same thing. The help we received was incredible, and I want to do something to pass on that kindness." Lisa nodded, excited about the idea. "Why don't we start with something small, like a community event? We could organize a food and clothing drive for those who are still in need." Marcus smiled, imagining the impact they could have. That sounds like a great idea. We can use our experience from the previous event to make sure this one is a success. I'll talk to Paul and Thompson to see how we can start organizing it. Lisa got up and gave Marcus a kiss. I'll start planning and preparing everything here. We can do this together and make a difference in other people's lives, just like they did for us. As Lisa went inside to begin planning, Marcus grabbed his phone and called Paul. He was eager to share the idea and get support from his coworkers. "Hi, Paul. It's Marcus," he said when Paul answered. "Hey, Marcus. How's it going?" Paul asked in a friendly tone. "I'm doing great, thanks. Actually, I'm calling because Lisa and I were thinking about how we could give back to the community, especially after all the help we received. We want to organize an event to collect food and clothing for those in need. What do you think?" Paul was silent for a moment, clearly surprised, before responding with enthusiasm. "That's an incredible idea, Marcus. The team will love helping with that. We can start planning right away. I'll talk to Thompson and see how we can rally the team again." Marcus felt a huge sense of relief and satisfaction hearing Paul's enthusiasm. "Perfect. I'll discuss the details with Lisa and keep you updated on our progress. I really appreciate you being willing to help once again." "Of course. It's a pleasure to help, and I'm sure many others will want to get involved. Let's make it happen." With Paul's and the team's support, Marcus and Lisa began planning the new community event. They met with Thompson and other colleagues to discuss the details and set a date. The excitement was contagious, and soon the planning was in full swing. The following weeks were dedicated to organizing the event. Marcus and Lisa worked together to coordinate the collection of food and clothing, contact local businesses for donations, and ensure everything was ready for the big day. The community responded positively, with many people volunteering to help with the event. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The community hall was once again decorated, this time with a theme celebrating unity and solidarity. There was a large central table with the collected items and several boxes around the hall for people to drop off their donations. Marcus and Lisa were at the hall, welcoming the first guests and thanking everyone for their support. Paul and Thompson were there to help and make sure everything ran smoothly. "Hi, Marcus," Thompson said, shaking Marcus's hand. "The event is fantastic. The community really came together again. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We couldn't have done this without all of your support," Marcus replied with a sincere smile. Paul approached, carrying a box of donations. "Look at this. People really brought a lot of stuff. It's going to make a big difference for those in need." Lisa joined them, holding a stack of thank you cards written by local school children. "Look at these cards. The kids are so excited to be involved. It's wonderful to see the next generation getting engaged and learning about solidarity." The event was a great success. The donations were generous, and the atmosphere was filled with joy and community spirit. Marcus and Lisa were moved to see so many people coming together to help others. As the event drew to a close, Marcus and Lisa sat together, looking at the now empty hall, but filled with donated items. "Look at what we've accomplished, Marcus," Lisa said with a satisfied smile. "The community really made a difference once again." "Yeah, and it's been amazing to see it all come to fruition," Marcus replied, hugging Lisa. "The help we received in the past months made all the difference, and now we're giving it back in the best way possible. I feel like we're part of something truly special." As they prepared to clean up and wrap up the event, Marcus and Lisa reflected on the positive impact they had managed to create. The cycle of help and solidarity continued, and they were happy to contribute to a community that had been so generous to them. Walking home with their children by their side and a sense of accomplishment in their hearts, Marcus and Lisa knew that, despite the challenges, they had found a new purpose and a new way to make a difference in the lives of those around them. With renewed hope and a strengthened sense of community, they were ready to face any future challenges, knowing that solidarity and support were the foundation of their journey. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed creating this content for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to receive all our updates. If you'd like to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments, we'd be delighted to read and respond to all of you. See you in the next video. Warm regards.